Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to the first of our two-part career conversation series. So today's session will be on career planning and decision making, where we'll be hearing from some of our industry members who have navigated very different paths over their career. We'll be hearing a bit about what to expect, how to make decisions, and hopefully anything and everything you want to explore. So prepare your questions, think of some things you want to ask our panelists today. Before we begin, I just want to go over some housekeeping. I'm recording this webinar and its transcript, which will be available online. So if you do not wish to be recorded, please turn off your video and or mute yourself. And we'll share the recording and slides with you following the event, as usual, in the CrowdSolve space under the event forum area. So when you're not asking questions today, please, just to avoid distractions, mute yourself. But as soon as you have something that you want to ask, just jump in, unmute yourself, raise your hand. And please turn on your camera for that. So to make things easier on us during the panel discussion, if you have a question, please do use the hand raising function or get into the chat and just send it through there. We'll also have a Mentimeter open partway through the section, so you can ask your questions through there. And those can be sent in anonymously, somewhat, directly to me, or you can send them to the room. Okay, so we have a little bit of a longer session for you today. I'll be available in the last 15 minutes for any other questions that you might have. And here's the agenda. So we're currently going through the introductions, and then we'll quickly have a benchmark poll. I know there's only 2 of you in the room at the moment, so we'll see how that goes. And then that'll allow us to figure out where everyone stands with career planning and thinking. And then we'll have a couple. We'll go through our panel discussion, have some Mentimeter questions in the middle of it, and finally we'll have a closing poll and our usual closing elements, as well as a Q&A. But I don't want to hold anything up any further. So first, I just want to launch this poll and hear a bit about what everyone's thinking in terms of their career planning so far. So I know we only have 2 in the moment, I'm just trying to get a sense of where you are with your thinking. So either you don't know what you want to do after university yet, you know what you want to do, but you don't know how to get there yet, or you know where to go and how to do it. So if you can just take a moment and answer those questions, that'll give us a sense of where you are. Okay, great. We have 1 answer so far. I don't know if anyone can see that, but it's, you know what you want to do after university, but you don't know how to get there yet, which I think many people at master's level are kind of, that's where they're sitting at the moment. You've kind of specialized, you know what you want to be doing, but maybe you don't know quite where to go from here. Let me just share those so you can all see them. And now that we have that kind of laid out, I see that now we only have no Sakari in the room. Maybe the others had technical problems and are coming back in. But first, I just want to ask all the speakers to quickly introduce themselves. So Amanda, would you like to start?
Sure. Hi, all. My name's Amanda Brondy. I'm the Vice President of International Projects at the Global Cold Chain Alliance. So I work in international development, which has been pretty much my background since I got my master's degree, which was a long time ago now. But immediately after graduation, I did go to work for a large contractor for USAID projects, and I spent a couple of years working in the Congo and about 3 years working in East Timor as well. and handled kind of their Asia projects before transitioning over to the Global Cold Chain Alliance, where I've focused exclusively on the movement of temperature-controlled products for the past 8 years now. So that's it for me. I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for joining us. Amanda's joined us very early in the US. So big thanks to her for taking the time. Next up, can we hear from Ellen? A little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ellen Dobbs. I'm a freelance consultant based in London, focused on supporting climate innovation and energy access, particularly in the sphere of prizes, funding and in innovation processes. And I typically do a mixture of research, analysis, strategy, project management for various clients. I went freelance 18 months ago, and before that, I led awards and funding programs, typically on behalf of NGOs, including managing the International Ashton Awards and co-delivering the Fair Cooling Fund. I've also worked on the Earthshot Prize, which is a UK-based climate solutions prize. I started out my career in the field of environmental behavior change, so thinking about how people interact with technology and systems, and delivering programs for UK-based corporates, SMEs, public sector organizations. Before that, I gained an MSc in sustainable development, but my BA was in languages and literature, so I'm originally from an arts and humanities background.
Very, very. Thank you, Ellen. And Ellen has taken some time out of her time to join us today, so thank you to her as well. First thing this morning. Last few months. Sharia, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Yes, thank you, Sean. This is Sharyar, and I run a company called Harness Energy. We have been in the solar energy access business for the past 7 years. We started the company in 2016, basically focused on solar lanterns just to see how the market was in Pakistan. And now we have a pretty big catalog of products that we offer to low-income households in Pakistan. And then we also have financing agreements in place with a lot of practitioners to offer these products on affordable installments. I have been trained in economics. My master's was in economics and bachelor's as well. But I come from something called a business family, where in Pakistan, you know, for the last 3-4 generations, I've been running their own business. So we have sort of that in our DNA. And so I went to study on the Fulbright Scholarship, and I've also been an Acumen Pakistan Fellow, and excited to be here in this panel.
Thank you very much, Sharyar. Okay. So now that we've completed our introductions, maybe we can get into the juicy bit of today's event. So we have a panel discussion. I'll quickly just stop sharing my screen, and I don't think that's necessary throughout. And I know Khalid and Nasakari, we only have you in the room. I see now we're just getting Faiza, but depending on how things go at the as people join in, maybe we'll treat this more as a session for you, and particularly the recording. So we'll see how much time we have at the end for we can widen out the discussion a bit more. So first, I just want to ask you all to throw your minds back for a moment and think about what you were expecting out of a career when you were finishing university, which is the point at which all of our students are at today. Nearing the end now in the last term, I think, and whether those kind of expectations came to fruition. So maybe we can start again with Amanda.
Sure. Yeah, congratulations to all of you for finishing. I didn't have much idea, honestly. I knew I was going to get a master's degree and it was going to have something to do with international, but beyond that, I really couldn't have told you a specific job that I was interested in. And it did work out for me, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that people follow the path that I took. And I can speak to that a little bit more later. But if you don't have any idea what you want to do, you're probably kind of like me, if you just picked a field and kind of left it general. I guess maybe Ellen's next.
Yes, go ahead, Ellen.
Sure. So I guess it sounds very similar to Amanda's experience in some ways. I definitely struggled to know what I wanted to do at undergrad level with an arts degree and a conviction that I wanted to work in the climate sector, on social issues, but really not sure how to apply those skills, and even at postgrad stage. But nonetheless, over the last 10 years, I've managed to carve out a kind of trajectory and find interesting roles that have allowed me to grow and develop. And I guess taken more of an organic career path with one role leading to another in a way that I just couldn't have foreseen at the start. And I guess in terms of what to look for in a career, a really useful thing that someone once told me was to try and map out where my skills and interests intersect with a real need in the world. So both in terms of a market opportunity, so what someone will pay you to do, and in terms of impact, so the ability to address a pressing environmental or social need. And if you can find this sweet spot in theory, you know, you've really struck on something great. It's a useful framework, but really hard to put into practice. So I started with trying to find a role, just about any role within the sector I wanted to work in, within the environment and climate sector, and kind of built out from there. But you may also start with kind of another aspect that you know about yourself, i.e. what you're good at. That could be a really useful starting point as well, and then you can work towards kind of where to apply that.
Right. Thanks, Ellen. And finally, Sharia, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'll echo what Amanda and Ellen said. I mean, when I was in college or university, while you were, when your last semesters, you have a lot of thoughts and, you're juggling so many balls. So I didn't really have clarity on what I wanted to do. But because the training was in economics, so my tendency was towards, either work in finance or actually I wrote this in my Fulbright application that eventually in 10 years, I see myself in the central bank. It's sort of like the Federal Reserve of Pakistan that manages policy, because Pakistan has been having a lot of, like I said, macroeconomic problems. So I sort of wanted to play some of my part in that. But frankly speaking, where I am today, I would never have foreseen this, that I'll be working in clean energy and running my own business. So yeah, it did not really, it wasn't really planned. Your trajectory changes as you, on a month-to-month basis, pretty much. And also, I think one thing that I definitely would want to share, because sometimes people get bogged down by the sort of the major they choose. I mean, it's not mandatory. You shouldn't have any pressure, based on the degree you're studying for, to work in the same sector. Of course, I mean, if you're pre-med, of course, you've chosen your line. If you want to be an engineer, that's something else. But like if you go to university and choose like a soft major, not hard sciences, so don't get bogged down, that you have to specifically work in that sector. So that is something that, keep your options open.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sharia. And it seems like there's a overlying theme that it kind of comes to you as you go through your career, which is great to hear. I think a lot of people coming out of university, perhaps they feel a little lost. I know people in the poll said that they know what they want to do, but they don't know how to quite get there yet. Maybe that means it's kind of a broad area that they're trying to get to. My next question, I think, connects to what Ellen was just sharing, her bit of advice about how to identify your area. So Ellen, you made a big career shift recently. You just mentioned that you went freelance 18 months ago. I think maybe that demonstrates that you know what you want out of your career, or at least a direction you want to go into. So what do you think someone should look for in a career?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think coming back to those points around trying to map out what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, what you're good at, where that fits kind of in the world in terms of impact that you would like to create over the course of your career, what you would like to change as a result of your work. And I assume everyone on this call is interested in some aspects of kind of social and environmental impact. So yeah, I think, and in addition to that, there are obviously practical considerations, value-based considerations around salary, location, work-life balance, flexibility. These are all kind of things that will impact upon kind of the decisions you make in your career. Certainly for me, the choice to go freelance was partly driven by wanting to widen my experience, work with lots more organizations and experience different types of assignments, but it was also about being at a point in my life where I need a little bit more flexibility as to what my working day looks like. So and also have a think about the type of organization that might suit you. It sounds obvious, but the working culture is so different according to whether you work in an NGO, a startup, the corporate world, the academic world. I personally have always really enjoyed working for small NGOs because it's relatively fast-paced, impact-focused. You get a lot of responsibility to kind of be able to shape things, but that might not be the culture that works for you. So if you can experience a few different environments, that could really help to kind of crystallize for you what is most important.
Yeah, I think learning and understanding what you want is an important step in planning out your career. Okay. I was just in regards to this planning and decision making. Amanda, you said you were quite focused within your career in international development, and eventually working yourself up to the role as Vice President of International Projects at Global Cold Chain Alliance. And I was wondering, while building your career, was it mostly a matter of creating opportunities for yourself or seizing opportunities when they presented themselves to you? I guess, in other words, is career progression more about careful planning or creating opportunities for yourself? Is it creating opportunities for yourself or strong decision making for when an opportunity presents itself to you?
Sure. I mean, for me specifically, it was probably more of the opportunity presenting itself to me. But that said, I think for a general rule, it's both of those and probably a whole lot more, depending on what opportunities exist and what personality type an individual has. I think when it comes to the whole lot more, you know, as you're figuring out what you want to do, I think it's important to be really honest with yourself, both about your likes and dislikes, but then also, as Ellen said, figuring out what you're good at. I think there's been a big push on doing something that you're passionate about, which is really important. But at the end of the day, stepping back, you know, I may do international development work and it's all about the movement of perishable products, but I'm still working in Excel and I'm still writing reports and I'm still doing this day-to-day kind of just concrete, basic fundamental skills. And, you know, you just have to be honest, what part of those aspects of a job would you actually enjoy doing? Because that will be your day-to-day, regardless of what the long-term impact will be, which hopefully will keep you going doing those mundane activities. But there's a lot of paper pushing no matter what the job is. So just kind of bear that in mind. I think also it really helps when you're looking at opportunities to just be patient. You know, with the position, sometimes, as Ellen indicated, you know, it may be the organization, maybe the job that you're in at an organization or something that they've offered to you is not that interesting, but you love the organization. Sometimes if you stick around, you might find the individuals who advocate for you. You might have other opportunities that open up and present themselves. You might be able to, if an organization is small in particular and flexible, or large and flexible, you might be able to, you know, choose a pathway or help kind of mold a pathway that's more interesting and more in line with your interest. I would say also, you know, keep your eye out for those mentors or, again, kind of advocates, people that can help you. So even, again, if you don't love the job, but you've got great network of folks who are interested in your individual kind of career, it may be worth staying there and not being quick to leave, because having that strong network around you can really, you know, do a lot. And so just bear in mind, you can do anything for a year. I think a lot of times people are really quick to jump ship and leave a job because they think it might not be everything. And sometimes that's the right choice. But just really weigh everything that you have going for you at a particular job and what your future progression there may be. I think, yeah, I'm not sure if that answered the question or not.
No, I think it does. Thank you very much, Amanda. Yeah, I think it's important to realize that staying somewhere is also a decision in itself. It's not some sort of stagnation. You're always working towards something anyway. But on that, Shariar, as an entrepreneur, you had to make a bold move and step out on your own. How can you kind of weigh risk versus reward within your career?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. I think this is the same old, do you want to take a risk but have an unstable income, or, versus stability of income that you have, where you have a relatively less risk taking. I think it's been proven now with a lot of research coming in that it basically depends on a bunch of stuff. First of all, primarily it's your personality. I think by the time you're in your early 20s, you pretty much have a very set personality.
Lost you for a moment, Shariar. I'm just going to message Shariar on the chat, see if you can see that. Okay. I think Shariar just dropped off, so hopefully he'll be back in a second. Probably just internet troubles. But while we wait, I have another one in the barrel for Ellen. So it seems an underlying current is to kind of pursue your interests and what's important to you. How would you advise someone identify what's important to them in a career?
Yeah, I think there may be some things like for me, I knew that working in an impact focused organization was an absolute kind of non-negotiable at the start. So there might be certain things that you hold true and are kind of obvious and evident, but it can also be really hard to know what is important to you at the start against other factors. So I guess trying out as many different things as possible. I think this builds on what Amanda and Shariar have been saying at the start can be really helpful. And that might be within one organization, might be your first job. One of my first roles out of university, I was working for a small social enterprise doing admin essentially. And gradually I asked whether I could work on monitoring and evaluation on a small project on the side. That went well. Gradually, I built up to doing the project management on a small project, managing the budget, the timeline, etc. So little by little, even though I had my kind of day-to-day job, I was trying out all of these other different things, events, comms on the side, and that was such a useful way to start to understand what I most enjoyed and what was kind of most important to me within a role. And that might be within, as kind of Amanda was saying, within the role in the organization you find yourself within at the time. But it could also be that you try out a few different things, a year here, 2 years there. I think at the start of your career, that's absolutely fine too, building your understanding of kind of the sector and the landscape. So I guess don't put yourself under pressure to know exactly what your path will be at the start. The more experience you have, the more you'll know about yourself, and also maybe think a little bit outside the domain of what you're being paid to do, like your paid work. Think about, is there any kind of voluntary work you could be doing? Is there any kind of shadowing, even the day-to-day conversations you're having? All of that kind of builds your picture of kind of the opportunities ahead of you.
Thanks. Really great advice. And I think sometimes it takes some seeking to find those different things to go into. So yeah, take the opportunity to do that. So Shariar, we just lost you, lost your connection right after you said set personality. So that's when I lost you.
Yeah, sorry about that. Power
No
outage, the internet device got restarted. So I think first of all, you have to be clear about what kind of person you are, whether you're willing to sacrifice, maybe 3-4 years of stable income and then have maybe a potential big reward at the end. You might even not have, at the end even, you might not have that, but whether you're willing to take the risk or not. And can you hear me, Sean?
Yeah, we can hear you. Yeah, it's all good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, and secondly, I think it also depends on your circumstances. For example, I think so. There's a dichotomy in this that when you're freshly out of university or college, you have much less responsibilities. You're relatively more willing to take risks because also most of the time you don't have a family, you don't have fixed bills per month to pay, so you're willing to take more risks and maybe start your own startup. But on the other hand, what I've seen is the best entrepreneurs are actually those who worked under someone for at least 2-3 years and then made those connections, got that experience, and then spotted a problem while they were working under someone and then started their own company. So this is something you have to, weigh in. I think working for 2 to 3 years, at least 2 to 3 years before jumping to start your own company is a very good idea. I think given what my journey has been over the past 7 years, I think if I did a sort of revisionist history account of if I had gone into the corporate sector or finance or banking sector in Pakistan, I might have made more stable income. But 7 years down the line, I think the reward has been really high in the sense, even though the first 3-4 years were very difficult, that now whenever there's clean energy funding or clean energy projects coming up in Pakistan, everyone reaches out to us first. So we're sort of the default energy access solar company that everyone goes to. So that's a good thing. And I guess, yeah, it is difficult to balance risk and reward. But like I said, there's a bunch of things that might guide you.
I think that is like a nice segue into this next section I want to go into. And I know we only have 2 people in the room at the moment. Maybe we can ask our speakers as well to get in on this. It's always a little risky asking people to go to these kind of third parties. I don't know if it'll work for you, Nasakari and Faisa. But check it out. So we have this Menti poll. And I see Peace is just joining. She can usually enter these Menti meters. One second, and I can reshare my screen so we can see these results. So the question is, what is your primary consideration? 1 second. There you go. There's also the Menti code. If you just go to menti.com, you can also get in that way. I don't know if people are able to access it already. And I think Peace and Siam are just joining the room now. So if you don't already have access to the previous chat, let me just wait for Peace to join audio. But for both of you, I'm just asking everyone to go onto this Mentimeter poll and fill in this code if you're asked for it. I just want to ask you, what is your primary consideration when searching for a career option? Or what do you think it would be? So what is it at this moment? Does anybody have access to that? Is that okay to reach? No? Otherwise, you can scan this QR code. I see one has, okay, I suggest yes. See, she's don't know what's going on. and I'll leave this open as well for only 1 seconds. And I'll leave this Mentimeter open for anyone. Next week. Yeah. A few people see this. Okay. So it seems really potential, and principles slash points are your main considerations when looking for production. And I think that makes sense at the moment, right? Particularly this growth potential, and that's the most votes for. Yeah, because that's the one area where okay, that's pretty tough. And you can continue on this centimeter and follow the answer the next question, which we can look at the end of that discussion. And then there's also an option to send in your questions there so we can get them up on the board. But I just thought that might be helpful to start considering that and how you will approach your career soon. So with that done, I just wanted to also go into what you were just saying, Shariar, about entrepreneurship. So last year in our endline survey, actually with our baseline survey, we had about 3% of our students interested in entrepreneurship. But at the end of it, about 10% were interested. So it seems that kind of the design challenge encourages people to enter entrepreneurship. And I wanted to ask, what kind of steps does someone need to take before they can start thinking about this?
Well, I think these days it's very easy to jump on the bandwagon of everyone starting their own business, and then also initially over the past 20 years, now over the past 6 months has gotten a bit different, but there was a lot of free money floating around everywhere. So people were funding all sorts of companies that basically shouldn't even have needed to exist. But actually first explore whether what you want to work on and the problems you're looking at, whether they actually need to be solved by a separate company or a separate business. But generally, I think I don't give advice because it varies from student to student and background to background. But generally speaking, I think first of all, make sure if you want to start your own company that you're 200% sure that the problem or the issue you're working on, it requires a separate, app or business model or way of working differently. So I think that's very crucial. I have a couple of friends, I was mentioning it to Sean when we met earlier last year in Kigali, that they now, after sort of doing their own startup after startup, doing these incubators and accelerators for like 4 years, one of my friends was like, well, if I had taken up this good job immediately after graduation, I probably would have been much better off overall. So always keep that in mind. But if you do have something in your head, maybe let's say you're working on a thesis, or you have a bunch of people, a group of 3-4 people who are equally passionate about something, then I think it's worth taking a risk. But again, depends on the context, depends on what kind of problems you're solving. So yeah.
Thanks, Shariar. Yeah, it doesn't work for everyone, and they don't always succeed, right? But it is important to consider maybe where you need to go beforehand. So there's always resources out there.
And also,
go ahead, Shariar.
Yeah, sorry. So my point was, there's no specific steps. I think, like Amanda mentioned earlier, you can never follow someone else's journey, no matter how many articles or books you read on Steve Jobs or, Larry Page. You cannot follow their journey because there's so many moving parts, over the years. So, but there's certain things that you can do. You can, at least introspect on the kind of person you are if you have family responsibilities, because in low income countries, that's a big factor. You have to take care of your parents and family as well. So these 5-6 factors that are very unique to you, you have to take those into considerations. I don't think there's specific steps, but generally speaking, what you can see is successful entrepreneurs, if you analyze their personality, The things that you do see in common, if you do that exercise, is that a willingness to be much more risk-taking and not, being afraid of failure, working extraordinary hours. That is something that all entrepreneurs do have in their routine. And I don't think there's any work-life balance initially, at least in the first 5 years when you're an entrepreneur starting a new company. So these few things that can help you sort of, if you want to call them steps. So be ready for this kind of stuff.
Yeah, and thanks for elaborating it. Yeah, important to understand the reality of it as well. And Amanda, I wanted to ask if you know of any tools or strategies for someone to forward plan. I know we've been talking a little bit today that maybe that's not the approach for everyone, that it's maybe navigate as you go, but maybe the plan isn't so far in ahead. I don't know what you think.
Sure. Yeah. I think on the strategy side, my recommendation is always to talk to as many people as you can. Set up informational interviews or just career conversations, and don't always approach those people that you think can either help you find a job or are within an organization that you think you'd want to work with. Just look at what people do. I think speaking with them is just a really good way to kind of identify potential jobs that you may want to do. And speaking with someone who's doing a particular job may either disabuse you of some notion that it's exactly what you think it is, or it might also open up the possibility that a particular career is more interesting and more fulfilling than you would have thought. So I think talking to people is kind of the first thing. Even once you have a job, I always recommend to people, never stop looking at jobs, even if you're not looking for a new career, because sometimes just seeing what's out there, if you feel any sort of dissatisfaction with your daily job, I've looked at other jobs in the past and realized that there's really nothing else out there that I'd rather do. And that goes a really long way when you feel a little bit of burnout, to just recognize that actually, what you're doing is pretty good relative to the other opportunity that exists. So I always stay kind of tuned in to job boards and just seeing what opportunities are out there. People always talk about networking, and I think that's important, but I would emphasize building relationships over just, a building up a large network. I think especially now, when social media started, people became more like horizontal and wanting to have more and more connections. I think that's kind of starting to shift a little, where now people are more focused on the actual relationship that you're having. So, focusing on those people, whether they're mentors or not, but just building up those relationships, I think, is important. And then if you do have a particular passion, whether it's, climate change or energy or anything, try to build a presence on social media for yourself, just so if someone's, looking you up, they see that you kind of, that you have this draw, that you really are genuinely engaged in that. And I would say to include LinkedIn. I know some of the younger staff that I work with at my job hadn't really focused in on LinkedIn. They were a little bit more active on other social networks, but I think from a career perspective, LinkedIn is kind of where most of the job stuff happens. And so I would recommend, if you haven't already kind of built up your profile and kind of get used to posting in a professional sense, that I do think it's helpful. We tend to look up, for what that's worth, we tend to look up individuals, and it's interesting to note, if someone says they have an interest in food loss and waste, that is actually there and they've indicated an interest. And so I think that can help you build up your presence. That's everything from me.
That was great. Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, lots of good strategies there. I think are really key for people to take away, and not so difficult to adopt. They're quite maybe just a change in mindset or the setup of a LinkedIn page, but great. Ellen, I wanted to ask, I think Amanda was saying maybe always keep your eye out for what's around you. And I wanted to ask, how far in advance do you think people need to be thinking in today's job market? How many steps ahead?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. And it's really interesting to reflect on the fact that so many of the roles and the jobs that I've done within the climate and environment sector kind of barely existed when I was getting careers advice at uni. And I have a kind of job, my freelance portfolio at the moment. I could never really have imagined that this is what I would be doing when I started out. So there will be very specific roles and career paths out there yet that might really suit you. And you might not know about them. That might be a very obvious thing to say. And I guess if you're like me, setting out and you're not quite sure, the first step, let alone the second, the third, I guess reflect on what we were talking about a few questions ago around what's most important to you, whether it's growth and learning opportunities or values and beliefs, etc. Orient yourself in that direction with your first step and take that first step. It doesn't have to be the perfect one. You can work out the subsequent steps later on. And it was really interesting to hear Amanda's answer here, because I think I would have said something really similar in terms of how to kind of work out those next steps. Be as curious as you possibly can about people and jobs. Keep an open mind. As Amanda said, ask people about what they do, why they enjoy it, what it involves. Also ask them about future trends they're excited in, where they see their sectors heading. Get a sense of kind of where aspects of the working world are going. Also, strategically kind of reading around your role, even if it's not part of your current job description. Follow media outlets that are focused on innovation, follow key social accounts, and again, kind of get curious about the direction things are headed, as in addition to kind of what the status quo is.
Thank you. Okay, and I think just maybe to take a different view of this, I wanted to then ask Amanda, how do you deal with an unforeseen setback? I think we've been taking a positive view going, leading up to this point, but what do you do if things go wrong?
Yeah, I was trying to think in the context of this question, I think from a career path, like unforeseen setbacks. And I think it's, whether it's not getting a promotion or failing at something that you thought was going to go rather well. So I kind of was thinking about what I would advise someone in that particular context. And I think it's hard to advise someone in that, because all of the advice, if you're going through something really tough in your career, sometimes the advice that people give sounds trite, and I don't want that to be the case here, but it's true that every challenge that you see in your career path can be flipped to be an opportunity, even though in the moment that can be really hard to do, especially if it's something, you were up for a promotion that you didn't get, and that can feel really devastating. But maybe that's the impetus that you need to, encourage yourself to look for another job, or perhaps it's that moment in time to make you actually speak with supervisors and really understand, like, what is it that you are doing well? What is it that you didn't do to get that promotion? And, there could be a number of reasons for that, but it's, I think that's usually what I try to tell younger staff, is take that moment and try to understand, how can we pivot from there, and reevaluate, which directions you want to go, or perhaps it helps you to determine you don't want to reevaluate. You want to stay on this path, but let's figure out the next steps to get you there. I actually just had this conversation with somebody that I work with, and I encouraged her to speak with her supervisor to understand, okay, she didn't get promoted. So what is she doing well? What is she not doing that would help her to kind of operate at that next level? So that way, it forces her supervisors to put that into writing, because sometimes some organizations are very organized with the way that they operate, and some are less so. And so when you're working, especially for small organizations that don't have a clear pathway forward, having your supervisor kind of being forced to articulate, this is exactly what you need to operate at a manager level, a director level, vice president, these are the steps you need to take. That's a good exercise for them, but then it helps you to understand where you want to go. So I was trying to come up with something concrete, but those are tough moments. There's no way around it. And I think, just from a human perspective, when those things happen, when you have a setback, let yourself just feel that. Let yourself be disappointed for a moment and then pick yourself up off the floor and try to figure out how you can get out of that situation or improve it or make it better. And maybe it is leaving, but maybe there are reasons to stay, and plotting out those next steps that you can take, try to ease that disappointment.
Sure thing. Yes, there's always the next step to take. You just have to figure out what that might be, right? And Shariar, I guess a particular setback might be realizing as Amanda said, you're not in the place you need to be. And I wanted to ask, what do you do when you suddenly realize you're not where you intended to be?
Well, so I'll qualify my answer with the statement that, what I'll be saying is sort of depends on whether if your business or startup is about 5 to 10 years old, because I can't really talk about proper mid-career because I haven't been there yet. But let's say 5, 6, 7 years into your startup, this feeling hit me a couple of years back when you realize, what am I doing here? And then, I think first of all, the gut reaction is generally towards, feeling down, look at my other batchmates from college, where they are, what they've achieved, and, where you are. I'm talking about a negative sentiment. So I think the first thing to be clear about is that it was your conscious choice to do this, right? So, it's no point, feeling really bad and depressed about the choices that you made. But the good thing, the silver lining is, no matter what kind of business you were in, if you're working under somebody, if you were running your own startup, even though, let's say, if you are not making as much money as you would have liked, or the business has not grown over the past 5, 6 years, as you were anticipating, there is always a lot of learning. Let's say personally, from my example, the biggest, I think, thing that I'm thankful about is that just out of college, if I would have taken a conventional corporate job, or a stable job, income, whatever, I would never have gotten to meet the thousands of families living in Pakistani villages whose lives are completely different from my lifestyle. And that has sort of brought me to the ground much more, has improved my outlook towards life in a much more humble way. You realize that your problems might not be as big of problems, if you compare them with the actual problems that you have on the field. So, sort of view things in a good silver lining. There always is learning. But I think also be careful. Don't make a rash decision. Let's say if you're working at a job where there's a dead end, you don't really like it, going into the job every day. Be careful. Let's say if you're in a recession and there's not a lot of jobs available, it's still good to be paying the bills. So wait the recession out, let's say. But I think if it's something that it's just affecting your health, and you realize that there's no point going further with this, then it's always good to take a different trajectory in life. If you read biographies, because I love reading biographies, because you always have all these different forks in the roads of various businessmen or political leaders, and exploring what was going on in their mind during when they were at that fork, whether which direction they took. That is something very important. So I think if I had to summarize it, get a bigger overall perspective in life, and you learned a lot of stuff. Let's say if you were in sales or marketing, you really liked interacting with people and making sales. So if you want to go into that sort of sector, meet people on LinkedIn or in person who might be able to guide you better, might be able to show you a different perspective. So I'm just rumbling at the end, but I hope that made sense.
Yeah, that was great, Mohammed. And speaking of these kind of forks in the road, we're running out of time, but I just wanted to ask Ellen, with these kind of difficult career decisions, are there any strategies that someone can adapt when they're met with these forks in the road?
Yeah.
Make them clearer, I guess.
And in answering this question, I was trying to think about some specific career decisions that I've faced. And I think one of the biggest has been that I've been faced with a number of times is whether to to stick it out in a role that was proving frustrating, or to call it quits and move on to something new. So Amanda's already touched upon this, but just to kind of build on that. Obviously, sometimes the decision of should I stay or should I go is dictated for you by short-term contracts, particular financial needs at the time, etc. But often you're having to kind of speculatively make a call on what you think is going to be best in the long term for your career, what you think is going to make you happiest. And those are really, really hard questions to be able to project in the future, into the future, and answer. So instead, a question I found it really useful to ask myself at various points is, which of these options is going to help me grow and expand my horizons the most, and versus which are going to sort of lead me to stay still where I am. And that's kind of the path that's led me to where I am now as a freelancer. And as Amanda said, obviously, sometimes the biggest source of growth is sticking with something difficult, taking on new projects, learning new skills, networking furiously, trying to get to the next level, resisting the urge to move on as soon as you start to feel dissatisfied. That said, there have definitely been other times in my life where the biggest accelerator has been deciding to move on, even when I wasn't 100% sure that the next step was the perfect one. Because I think sometimes change in itself can be a really powerful, propelling and motivating force. And it's a really fine balance as to know which way to go. But having that question in your mind of what will expand and enlarge my world versus what will limit it has been really helpful to me.
Good. Thanks, Alan. I think a great way to kind of close out this panel discussion. I think Peace kind of summed up in the chat. She felt that she personally needed such a talk, and it was beautiful to be here. I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for joining us today. It's been really great to hear you and all your advice. It's been, I think, really valuable, something that students can take away. I guess before we go, I just had this other Mentimeter poll open to everyone. And I just wanted to share that there is, we asked for some resources for people looking for career advice or guidance. These are from the audience, I guess, unless it's from our panelists. And the overarching one is LinkedIn. Big words on the screen. Again, this Mentimeter is open past the event. So if you're watching the recording, I encourage you to get on here so that we can kind of get these all together and share them maybe in a week or something. So we can have more areas and resources. Q&A. So this is available. You can either ask a question coming off mute, or send it in chat, or send it through Mentimeter. So lots of channels for you. But I think we have one in the chat. And I know some of our panelists have to leave on the hour. I'll also be here for another 15 minutes to answer any questions you might have. But first up, we have, what is next after school and how to get started? Is another cause for depression among students in their final year of school? Yes, I think, Peace, that's not actually a question. That's a statement. But I think it is a big, it's a big step you have to take finishing university and trying to figure out where to go. And I think a lot of people struggle with that. So I think it's really helpful to have opportunities like this to speak to people that have kind of gone through it. I know, Amanda, you have to leave right now. If you have any, I'll let you know if anything comes up. But thank you for joining us, and thank you for joining us so early as well. Have a nice day. If any of our other panelists need to go, completely understand, it's on the hour. But in the meantime, I can take any questions that students might have in the chat, and I can see if that's the case. In the meantime, before we close out, I just want to do our regular closing opportunity to provide feedback. So this is a short feedback survey. I just want to give this to everyone. This really helps us kind of improve these sessions throughout the year. So if you have anything to say about this session, really value that. It just takes a minute or so, and you can follow that QR code. Again, you can do that post session as well. So if you're watching this recording, so I'll just leave that up for a second. Nusakari asks, deciding to quit a job, for the prospect of a job, you don't always, it seems daunting. Any tips on how to handle this? So if you're in a job, but you don't know quite what the prospects are, I think is what Nusakari is getting at. How do you handle that situation? Deciding to quit it. And I guess I'll ask Ellen that question.
Yeah. Thank you. And I've
Sorry, I
been
think I framed this incorrectly as well. Sorry, Ellen. Maybe you got it, but I think I just reread it. I think it's deciding to quit a job for the prospect of another job. Seems daunting.
Okay.
How do you approach this? Sorry to
yeah, I think it's I've been in this situation a number of times, and it is really hard. It sometimes feels like kind of taking a leap into the unknown. I guess first of all, just going back to kind of the conversation we've had over the past hour, maybe check in with yourself and see whether moving on is really going to kind of ease the frustrations you feel or open up more opportunities for you, because obviously sometimes there's more you can do in the situation you're in, but I think once you've decided that moving on, it really is the right direction, be bold about it. I think there's a lot to be said for change, in terms of motivating yourself, and kind of spurring on your career rather than staying in the same place. And I think in terms of kind of tips to handle this, I think maybe just to realize that it's not the end of the world if it doesn't work out often. You don't have to stay in a new role forever. I've known plenty of people who have taken a big, bold step and realized, within a few months that actually the role isn't as suited to them as they thought. Maybe they feel it was a mistake, but actually, you can stick it out for a year whilst kind of plotting your next move, as it were. And that knowledge about why it wasn't right for you can be one of the most valuable sort of insights in terms of making the best decision in the future. Alternatively, you might find it was a brilliant move and exactly the right thing to do. So I guess don't let fear of it not being the perfect next move or fear of it being the wrong decision kind of lead to inertia and keep you in one spot. Be bold and navigate kind of however it turns out.
Thank you very much, Ellen. Yeah, I think it can be scary, can't it? Approaching those big things and you don't know quite what's on the other side. But Ellen's right that sometimes you just have to take a leap of faith. And don't forget that you can always look for new roles while you're in a role as well. So you don't necessarily have to leave one until you find one, for example. Okay, and I'll still be taking questions. Shariar had to leave. I don't know if Ellen has to leave as well. I also wanted to put up this opportunity to sign up to the newsletter if you're not already signed up. I think people probably already are, but it's important for keeping up with what's on the challenge. Now they're only quarterly, so we don't overwhelm your inbox, but we'll have some great stories in there and successes from the challenge. So I think these are really exciting reads, particularly when you're on the challenge. So I would recommend it. Otherwise, if we don't have any questions, I can close out the session, but feel free to keep asking them. And thank you all for coming. I think this was, a really great session. I know we always had 4 of you in the room, but thank you for joining, and thanks Ellen for joining, and the other 2 speakers that were here today. Hopefully I can share this recording and people can continue working towards the week. So, sorry, P says, I joined in a little late, request on highlight on the link. Which link is that piece that you're looking for? Is that the Mentimeter link? Yeah, okay, there you go. And yeah, fill in those answers, please, and we'll share them with everyone once the recording has been shared. But okay, so I'm gonna let you all go. I think there's no more questions, and thank you, Ellen, for joining us. Thank you all for attending. And speak to you soon.